Chapter 1. The Flames of Death and Rebirth. The floor felt like molten lava against Ryan's back, each breath a struggle against the thick, acrid smoke that had invaded his lungs. He coughed, half gasping, half choking, and the pain ricocheted through his body like a pinball machine from hell. Mechanical parts pinned his legs, their weight a cruel reminder of his own humane fragility. The fire had exploded too close, too fast. He was trapped. Sweat trickled down Ryan's forehead, mingling with soot and, he's not afraid to admit it, tears. His workspace, his sanctuary for the past year, was now his inferno. Hell, the screams of his coworkers had long faded into an eerie silence, leaving only the crackling of flames. Ryan let out a weak laugh, a bitter chuckle at the irony of it all. Scared of fire his whole life, once traumatized by being burned by a candle as a child's stupid curiosity, and now here he was, on the verge of becoming its next victim. Again, but worse, he was totally fucked. His lungs burned, fighting a losing battle against the smoke that filled every inch of the room. Each shallow breath was like inhaling shards of glass. He had lost hope minutes ago when the last escape route was swallowed by the flames. He was going to die here, and it was going to be slow and excruciating. Ryan closed his eyes, retreating into the only sanctuary left, his mind. What if he knew the fire-breathing techniques like Rengoku from Demon Slayer? He pictured himself standing tall amidst the flames, slicing through them with the fiery grace of a seasoned warrior. What if he could firebend like Zuko from Avatar? He imagined bending the flames to his will, creating a path to safety with a mere flick of his wrist. Or what if, like Daenerys from Game of Thrones, he was immune to fire? He'd walk through the inferno unscathed, emerging like a phoenix from the ashes. He imagined hatching dragon eggs, just like Dany, and having 3 majestic creatures as his faithful companions. Ryan's mind clung to these delusions, these impossible fantasies. It was better than facing the reality of his impending doom. He thought of his friends, his small circle of fellow geeks and dreamers. They've spent countless hours discussing these very scenarios, laughing at the absurdity of it all and how awesome it would be. And now, here he was, living out one of those what ifs in the worst possible way. As the pain intensified and his vision blurred, Ryan's fantasies began to fade. Fucking hell, it hurts so much. Tears came out again as he stared dazedly into the flames. He was so fucking scared. Ryan didn't want to die. Not by fire. Not like this. Amidst his breakdown, a sudden ringing pierced Ryan's thoughts, a bell that seemed to be coming from the flames in the chaos. Ryan barely heard it. It was a commanding, melodic voice echoing in his ears, stating that they had heard his wishes and wished him well on his second journey. What the hell? Wishes? What wishes? And what second journey? Second journey? My ass. He was fucking dying. Was he hallucinating? Was this the end? Darkness started to creep in from the edges of his vision. Ryan was slipping away, consciousness fading like the last embers of a dying fire. The cruel irony. Just as he was about to close his eyes, the voice spoke again, clearer this time, declaring that he was deemed worthy of becoming the prince who was promised. Ryan managed a final, weak laugh. Maybe, just maybe, there was something beyond this inferno. And then, everything went black. Ryan was in darkness. Pure darkness with only his conscious mind still intact. He couldn't feel, touch, hear, taste, or see. Just his mind and thoughts. Was he stuck like this forever? Wasn't he supposed to be dead by now? Confusion swirled in Ryan's mind, but clarity was a distant dream. Time lost its meaning, and he couldn't tell if he had been here for seconds or days. In the midst of the silent darkness and his thoughts, an unbearable pressure suddenly enveloped Ryan, squeezing every inch of his being as if he was being forced through a narrow tunnel. The crushing pain was relentless, an unending torment that made him want to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. He was trapped in a void, a place where none of his senses worked, where only pain, suddenly existed. The fire should have consumed him. Why did he feel anything at all? Then, like a distant echo, a sound broke through the void. At first, it was overwhelming, a cacophony that made Ryan's ears ring. The roar of fire was familiar, a haunting reminder of his last moments. But there were other sounds too, screams, voices, fragments of a world beyond the darkness. Who did they belong to? As his senses slowly aligned, exhaustion washed over him. Ryan felt an overwhelming urge to sleep, to escape the pain and confusion. So, He let the darkness take him once more, and surrendered to the void. When he could finally open his eyes, the world was a blur of colors and sounds. The pain had subsided, replaced by a strange, new sensation. The air felt different, heavy with smoke and another scent he couldn't identify. Loud cries pierced the air, harsh and desperate. Ryan realized they were screams of agony. A woman's cries, filled with pain and effort, and another voice, urgent and commanding. His mind struggled to piece together the fragments of his surroundings. "Push, Your Grace. Just a little more." The voice was authoritative, filled with command and concern. The woman's cries grew louder, more intense, and a wave of pain hit Ryan anew, but this time it wasn't just his. It was as if he could feel her suffering, her struggle. Then, all of a sudden, Ryan felt free, the constrictions gone. "It's a boy, Your Grace." In full force, his senses returned. The world around him started to take shape. He saw the dark sky flashing with orange hues of light. Fire. Flames. A massive architectural structure was burning. Blurred figures appeared and became clearer. Ryan saw a woman in labor, her face contorted with pain. A man in robes hovered nearby, giving instructions and offering comfort. Ryan tried to make sense of it all. Where was he? What was happening? The last thing he remembered was the fire at his workplace, his supposed final moments. The woman's screams resonated with him, and suddenly, Ryan felt a sharp, piercing cry escape his own lips. The sound startled him, and he realized it wasn't a cry of a grown man but of a newborn. A baby. Confusion gripped him as the pieces fell into place. No way. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. No fucking way. He wasn't just reborn, he was being born. The fire wasn't from his workplace, it was another tragedy, another inferno. And his new mother, giving birth in this situation. Respect, man, Jesus Christ. Where was he reincarnated? Which world? Please don't let this world be Attack on Titan. He'll probably commit suicide as it is. As the world around him swirled in chaos and confusion, a new voice cut through the cacophony. The woman's command rang clear in the air of authority and longing. She wanted Ryan, and the helper complied, gently passing him into her waiting arms. Ryan found himself cradled in her embrace, feeling the strength and tenderness in her touch. Her silver blonde hair was matted with sweat from labor, framing a face of both beauty and exhaustion. Her lavender eyes, filled with love and pain, met Ryan's, and for a fleeting moment, a connection sparked between them. A smile graced her lips, a bittersweet expression that spoke of both joy and sorrow. She spoke a name that electrocuted Ryan to his core. My baby, my Raymond. Raymond Targaryen. As the name Targaryen reverberated through his ears, a chill ran down Ryan's spine, a shiver of recognition and dread that gripped him to his core. Targaryen. The name carried a weight, a legacy of power and peril that echoed through the annals of fictional history. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Panic surged within him, a wild fluttering in his chest that threatened to suffocate him. Reincarnated as a Targaryen, in the world of Game of Thrones. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and fear clawed its way into his mind. He was a fucking Targaryen, a name synonymous with dragons, ambition, madness, and death. He tried to push back the rising tide of panic, but the knowledge that he was thrust into a world where treachery reigned and alliances crumbled sent a wave of unease crashing over him. Ryan hadn't read the books, barely watched the show. His knowledge of this brutal and unforgiving world was limited to fragments, snippets, and spoilers. Win or be killed. The words echoed in his mind, a grim reminder of the ruthless game that played out in the lands of Westeros. He was ill-equipped, unprepared for the machinations and bloodshed that awaited him as a Targaryen. He didn't even know what year it was in this world. Doomed. The thought hung heavy in the air, a shadow that loomed over him like a specter. He was a stranger in a strange land, a pawn in a Game of Thrones that he barely understood. Ryan's thoughts shattered like glass as another wave of pain gripped his new mother, causing her to cry out in anguish. The suddenness of her scream startled him, and he felt a pang of fear and helplessness. The helper's voice cut through the chaos, informing her that there was another baby coming, that she was having twins. Ryan was gently passed back into the helper's care, his mother's cries echoing in the night as she continued to labor, bringing another life into the world. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, a heavy blanket that threatened to pull him under. As he drifted into unconsciousness, the sounds of his mother's screams became a distant lullaby, a haunting backdrop to his entrance into this new and tumultuous world. The knowledge of his twin, being born alongside him, lingered in the air. And so, in the midst of fire and birth, Rhaemon Targaryen found himself at the threshold of a destiny entwined with prophecy and power, a legacy that awaited its reckoning in the turbulent lands of Westeros. Hey guys, this is just an experiment for now. I'll continue the story if people are interested in it or not. I've been wanting to write a GOT fanfic, so this is a dip in the waters for me. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 13 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 2. Blessed by the Gods. 1. 259 AC. The acrid scent of smoke and the roar of flames filled the air as the group outside Summerhall scrambled to escape the spreading inferno. The heat was unbearable, and the scene was one of chaos and desperation. Rhaella Targaryen, exhausted from the arduous labor of birthing twins, lay helplessly on the grass, clutching the newborn Rhaegar to her chest. Maester Corso, his face a mask of panic, barked orders to the servants and guards, urging them to move quickly. "Get her up, we must get them all to safety," he commanded, his voice strained with urgency. 2 servants and the guards hastily lifted Rhaella, trying to support her as she stumbled, her legs weak and trembling. The fire was closing in, the crackling of burning wood and the screams of those trapped inside the building adding to the nightmarish atmosphere. As the group began to move, the flames leapt to the tree beside them, igniting its branches in a sudden, violent blaze. "Run, hurry," Maester Corso shouted, his eyes wide with dread. In their haste, one of the servants tripped, her foot catching on a root. She fell to the ground, holding Rhaemon tightly in her arms. The flames licked at the grass, reaching out hungrily. Rhaella's scream pierced the night as she saw her firstborn son fall beside the burning tree. "No, my baby, no," she cried, her voice raw with terror. The servant girl screamed in agony as the fire engulfed her, her flesh searing in the intense heat. The flames wrapped around her and Rhaemon, consuming them both. The other servants and guards stood frozen, paralyzed by fear and horror, unable to move or act. Rhaella's screams grew louder, a mother's desperate plea, "Get him out. I order you, save my son." But no one dared approach the inferno. They watched, helpless, as the flames danced and crackled around the servant and the infant. The fire raged for what felt like an eternity, and then, as suddenly as it had started, it receded. The charred remains of the servant crumbled into ash, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. And there, amidst the smoldering remnants, lay Rhaemon Targaryen, miraculously unscathed. The infant prince was still asleep, untouched by the fire that had consumed everything around him. The sight left the onlookers in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Maester Corso, closest to the miraculous scene, was the first to recover from his shock. He rushed forward, scooping the unharmed baby into his arms, his voice trembling with awe and reverence. "A miracle," he whispered, "a child blessed by the gods." The maester's words broke the spell that held the others. Rhaella, tears streaming down her face, reached out for her son, her relief mingled with disbelief. The guards and remaining servants, shaken but galvanized by the miraculous survival of the prince, resumed their efforts to escape the burning ruins of Summerhall. As they hurried away from the flames, Rhaemon's unburnt form cradled safely in Maester Corso's arms, the significance of what had transpired began to sink in. This child, born amidst tragedy and fire, was no ordinary infant. He was Rhaemon Targaryen, the firstborn twin of Rhaegar, and he had been touched by the flames, yet remained unharmed. In the days to come, whispers of the miracle at Summerhall would spread, tales of the prince who was immune to fire. And as the Targaryen family grappled with the loss and devastation of the tragedy, the legend of Rhaemon Targaryen's miraculous survival would grow, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Ryan found himself once again enveloped in a void of darkness. Unlike the previous time, his senses were alive and alert. He could feel a gentle warmth surrounding him, almost like a comforting embrace. The darkness was not oppressive, it was soothing, and in this strange, comforting cocoon, time seemed to lose all meaning. He didn't know how long he had been here, but it felt like an eternity of peace. His mind drifted to the events that had led him to this place. He remembered the fire that had claimed his life, the searing pain, and the acrid smoke filling his lungs. The fear and despair of that moment were still vivid, but now, in this darkness, they seemed distant, like a bad dream. Then came the memory of his rebirth. He had been reincarnated as a Targaryen baby in Plaintoes, the brutal world of Game of Thrones. He didn't know who his new mother was, nor the exact year he was now living in. All he knew was that he was in an infant's body, in a world fraught with danger and deceit. He didn't want to die again. He didn't want to play the Game of Thrones. He just wants his normal life back. His peaceful, modern life with internet connection. Was that too much to ask? As he continued to bemoan his new predicament, a small, flickering flame appeared in front of him within the darkness. It was a small ball of fire, but the flames themselves were intense and wild, dancing with a mesmerizing energy. Ryan felt a strange pull towards it, a fascination that reminded him of his childhood, when he would stare at a lit candle, mesmerized by its glow, wondering what would happen if he touched it. Of course, he learned the bad way. Got burned and even traumatized himself for it. Call him stupid or whatever, but the temptation was too strong to resist. So even though he was afraid, he reached out again, his fingers trembling slightly, and touched the flame. The moment his skin made contact, the flame leapt to life, devouring his entire being. He expected a burning sensation. Yet, he felt no heat, no pain. Instead, the darkness around him exploded into pure, blinding white light. Suddenly, memories and knowledge bombarded his mind with a fierce intensity. Scenes from his favorite anime and shows began to play out in his mind, vivid and detailed as if he were watching them on a screen. He saw the fierce determination of Kyojuro Rengoku from Demon Slayer, the masterful execution of flame-breathing techniques, each move precise and powerful. The images shifted, and now he was watching Zuko from Avatar, The Last Airbender, each firebending technique flowing with grace and raw power. The movements were fluid, the fire bending to Zuko's will with a combination of strength, discipline, and inner balance. Ryan felt as though he were absorbing these skills, the knowledge seeping into his very being like water soaking into a sponge. He could see each technique in perfect detail, the stances, the control, the sheer physicality required. It was as if he were downloading files directly into his brain, each move and form becoming a part of him. Somehow, instinctively, he knew he could replicate these techniques. Like he actually had the supernatural power of fire and can produce the flames from using the same breathing techniques. But he also somehow knew he could not simply wield them without effort. The techniques required strength, precision, and the right muscle memory. He would need to train, to work hard, to perfect his form just as the characters he admired had done. This is crazy, he thought to himself, marveling at the strange turn of events. How is this even possible? But he didn't have time to overthink it. The knowledge continued to pour in, each technique and move embedding itself in his mind with clarity and purpose. He saw Rengoku's flame-breathing forms in detail, from the first form, unknowing fire, to the devastating ninth form, Rengoku. He could feel the heat, the intensity, the sheer willpower behind each strike. Then, the scenes of Zuko's firebending took over. He watched as Zuko manipulated fire with a combination of martial arts and breath control, the flames responding to his every command. Ryan could feel the discipline required, the focus, the inner peace that balanced the raging fire. As the light began to fade, the last of the knowledge settled into place. Ryan felt a deep sense of empowerment, but also a weight of responsibility. He knew that these powers, these techniques, would only be his if he earned them through hard work and dedication. He would have to build his strength, hone his skills, and cultivate the inner balance needed to wield fire effectively. But still, how fucking awesome. Was the voice he heard before he died actually real? That his casual what-ifs delusions were interpreted as his wishes? Did the voice, or whatever omniscient being who heard him, grant his wish? Shit, is that why he got reincarnated in Game of Thrones? Fuck, he should have been more specific with his wishes then. He wanted to go to the Marvel Universe. Not here. Can he get a refund or a do-over? Here's a bit more of a sneak peek winking face. Tell me your thoughts and guesses. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 19 comments 0 vote. Chapter 3. Blessed by the Gods. 259 AC. In the aftermath of the Summerhall tragedy, the royal family of House Targaryen was a shattered remnant of its former self. The Seven Kingdoms were thrown into chaos by the news of the disaster. King Aegon V, his son and heir Duncan, and Esser Duncan the Tall, the revered Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, had perished in the fire. The realm mourned deeply, and the past week had been a somber period of grief and hurried political maneuvering to ensure stability. Daenerys Targaryen, the second of his name, the new king, sat heavily on the Iron Throne. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and sorrow. The responsibilities of the crown now weighed heavily on his frail shoulders, and the future of the Targaryen dynasty seemed uncertain. The tragic incident had not only taken the lives of beloved family members but also left a dark cloud hanging over the realm. Amidst this turmoil, the newborn grandchild, Rhaemon Targaryen, lay in what was known as the sleep of dragons, a deep coma that had persisted for an entire week. The infant, who was born and miraculously untouched by the fire that had claimed so many lives, was now the subject of much speculation, believers, and hope. They call him the Fireborne Prince. The courtiers whispered of divine favor, of a child blessed by the gods, but the reality was that Rhaemon Targaryen had not stirred since the tragedy. The great hall of the Red Keep was a place of somber grandeur, its towering pillars and stained glass windows casting long shadows across the stone floors. King Jaehaerys sat at the head of a large, oak table, his face set with resolve. Beside him stood Maester Corso, newly appointed after the tragic death of Maester Will at Summerhall, and Lord Ormond Baratheon, his steadfast hand of the king. Jaehaerys' mind was occupied with thoughts, drifting back to the prophecy whispered by the woods which Jenny of Oldstone had brought to court a few years ago. The prince that was promised will be born from the line of Aerys and Rhaella. These words never left him, and they had driven him to make decisions that weighed heavily on his conscience. While he himself had married for love, the prophecy had compelled him to command his son, Prince Aerys, and his daughter, Princess Rhaella, to wed against their wishes. It had been a decision born of necessity, not desire, and the recent birth of Rhaemon and his survival made him reaffirm his beliefs of the witch's foresight. "Thank you for coming," Jaehaerys began, his voice echoing through the hall. "We face a critical moment in the history of our house and our realm. As you both know, my grandchild Rhaemon survived the flames of Summerhall, a miracle witnessed by few, including you, Maester Corso." Maester Corso, a man of middle years with a scholarly demeanor, nodded fervently. "Indeed, your grace, it was a sight unlike any other." The flames licked at the child, yet he remained unharmed, as if the fire recognized him as kin. Jaehaerys turned his gaze to Lord Ormond Baratheon, a man of imposing stature and a pragmatic mind. "Lord Ormond, I know we had already discussed hiding the remaining dragon eggs, but I have decided that I will grant them to Rhaemon. There is an ancient belief that a Targaryen who bonds with a dragon gains enhanced immunity to illness, including the dragon sleep." Ormond's brow furrowed in skepticism. "Your grace, with all due respect, this belief is little more than a rumored claim. The dragons have been gone for many years, and the eggs have shown no signs of hatching. Placing our hopes on these dormant relics seems imprudent." Before Jaehaerys could respond, Maester Corso interjected. "My lord, Prince Rhaemon's survival is already a sign that he is no ordinary child. If there is even a chance that the eggs could respond to him, we must take it. The restoration of dragons would not only save Prince Rhaemon but also strengthen the Targaryen house immeasurably." Ormond shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed with concern. "Granting Prince Rhaemon the remaining dragon eggs will spark endless rumors and speculation. Not to mention the highborns of noble houses. They will talk, especially after what has happened. The memory of Summerhall is still fresh in the minds of many, and the loss of many lives was a deep wound." Jaehaerys raised his hand, calling for silence. His voice carried a weight of conviction as he spoke. "Lord Ormond, I understand your reservations, and I appreciate your pragmatism. But let us not dismiss the power of ancient beliefs and the whispers of magic that still linger in our world," Jaehaerys began, his voice steady and resolute. "The day the last dragon died, magic began to recede from our realm. The seasons, once predictable, grew erratic. Summers became shorter, and winters longer and crueler. The world lost its balance." He paused, allowing his words to sink in, before continuing. "And now, here we stand, witnessing a miracle. My grandson, Rhaemon, survived the flames of Summerhall unscathed and unburnt. How can we ignore the significance of this event? How can we dismiss it as mere chance?" Jaehaerys' gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of both men present. "Rhaemon's immunity to fire is a sign, a glimmer of hope that magic is finally returning to our world. It is a symbol of the ancient bond between House Targaryen and dragons. A bond that once brought us strength and prosperity." He leaned forward, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "What if this is the first spark, the beginning of a new era? What if Rhaemon's survival is not just luck, but a testament to the resurgence of magic? The dragons may be gone, but their legacy lives on within us. And if there is even a chance that the dragon eggs can awaken, that they can bring forth new life, we must seize it. Jaehaerys, words hung in the air, the weight of history and destiny heavy upon them. He looked at Maester Corso, his eyes filled with determination. Maester, you have seen the miracle with your own eyes. Tell me, how else would you explain Raymond's survival? How else can we account for his unscathed body amidst the flames? It is magic, my lord. Magic that has been absent for far too long. Jaehaerys paused and leaned back on his chair. Let the people talk, my decision is made. Maester Corso, if you please, bring the dragon eggs. Rhaella Targaryen sat beside the small, ornate cradle where her firstborn son, Raymond, lay in an unyielding dragon sleep. The dim light of the chamber flickered from the candles, casting long shadows on the walls. Her eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights and constant tears, never left her child. She clutched his tiny hand, feeling the faint warmth of his skin but receiving no response. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and hope, clinging to the fragile belief that her son was destined for greatness and would awaken. Rhaegar, her secondborn, cooed quietly in the arms of her mother, Queen Shera. The sight of her healthy, serene younger son only deepened Rhaella's anguish. She knew she should be grateful for Rhaegar's well-being, but her heart ached for Raymond. Each day that passed without change felt like an eternity. Rhaella, you need to eat, Shera implored, her voice gentle yet firm as she tried to coax her daughter into taking some nourishment. You need your strength, for both your sons. Rhaella shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I cannot, mother, not while Raymond lies like this. My heart cannot bear it. Shera sighed, her own worry etched deeply on her face. She glanced at Rhaegar, who looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. He is special, Rhaella. We all know it, but you must take care of yourself too. Before Rhaella could respond, the heavy wooden doors of the chamber swung open. Her father, King Jaehaerys II, entered, his presence commanding the room. He was flanked by 4 Kingsguard, their armor gleaming in the candlelight. The hand of the king, Lord Ormond Baratheon, followed, along with Maester Corso, Prince Aerys, and several servants carrying a large, intricately carved chest. Rhaella's heart leapt in her chest as she stood, still clutching Raymond's hand. Father, she said, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. What is happening? Jaehaerys approached his daughter, his expression a blend of stern resolve and deep compassion. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Rhaella, my dear, we have not given up on Raymond. There is still hope. He nodded to the servants, who carefully set the chest down and opened it. Inside lay 5 dragon eggs, each one a masterpiece of nature's artistry. One egg was green and bronze, shimmering like a forest canopy in the sunlight. Another was cream and gold, glowing with the warmth of a summer's day. The third was black and red, dark and foreboding like a stormy night. The fourth was black and blue, a deep, mysterious hue that suggested hidden depths. The last egg was black and violet, an alluring blend of darkness and royalty. As Maester Corso carefully arranged the 5 dragon eggs around the cradle where the infant Raymond lay, the room seemed to hold its breath. Each egg, with its unique colors and patterns, was placed with reverence, their presence both a reminder of the Targaryen legacy and a last hope. King Jaehaerys took the moment to address his daughter Rhaella and his wife, Queen Shera, who stood nearby. His voice was both solemn and hopeful. Rhaella, Shera, I want to explain the significance of what we are attempting here. The bond between Targaryens and dragons is ancient and powerful. It is said that our bloodline is intertwined with that of dragons, granting us protection and strength. After the tragedy at Summerhall, I had intended to hide these eggs, to keep them safe from further loss. But now, with Raymond's miraculous survival, it does not hurt to try and see if we might be blessed by another miracle. Rhaella, her eyes still red from days of worry, listened intently, her heart pounding with fear and hope. Shera held Rhaegar close, the healthy baby's quiet presence a small comfort amidst the uncertainty. While Maester Corso did not take his eyes off Raymond and the dragon eggs. His scholarly mind raced with the possibilities and the ancient lore he had studied. The air seemed charged with an almost electric anticipation. And he wasn't disappointed. Suddenly, a faint glow began to emanate from the eggs. Maester Corso's breath caught in his throat, and he gasped audibly, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. All eyes turned to the cradle. The room fell into a hushed silence as they watched the miraculous sight unfold. The stone eggs, long thought to be lifeless relics, continued to glow brighter, their colors becoming more vivid and intense. The glow grew until, startlingly and frightfully, flames erupted from Raymond, enveloping both him and the eggs in a blazing inferno. Rhaella screamed in terror, her instincts pulling her towards her son, but Jaehaerys held her back, his grip firm yet gentle. As the flames consumed the cradle, the room fell into a tense silence. All they could do was watch, caught between horror and fascination. The Kingsguard, their hands on their sword hilts, stood ready to take action at the first sign of danger. The servants, nervously clutching buckets of water, waited for any cue to douse the fire. The air was thick with anticipation, the flickering light of the flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. Just when it seemed the fire would never relent, a piercing cry shattered the oppressive silence. The sound jolted everyone out of their stunned forms. It was the cry of a baby. Raymond. Rhaella's heart leapt as she heard her son's wail. Raymond, she cried out, her voice breaking with fear and hope. All eyes turned back to the cradle, where they saw movement within the blazing inferno. The baby's cries turned to whimpers, and then, miraculously, the fire began to fade. The intense heat receded, the flames dying down until they were nothing but embers. As the smoke cleared, the room filled with gasps and curses of disbelief. There, amidst the still glowing embers, they saw a sight that defied reason and filled them with awe. 3 of the 5 dragon eggs had hatched. Tiny dragons, their scales shimmering with hues of black mixed with red, blue, and violet, crawled around Raymond. They cooed softly, their small, reptilian eyes full of curiosity and affection. King Jaehaerys stepped forward, his face a mask of stunned reverence. By the gods, he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. And there, in the center of this extraordinary scene, lay Raymond, finally awakened, blinking at the dragons. One of the servants fainted after a brief mutter of, "Dragons." The Kingsguard, usually stoic and unflinching, looked on with expressions of awe and disbelief, reacted with their own words, "7 hells." Or, "Gods be good." Rhaella, tears streaming down her face, rushed to her son's side. She scooped Raymond into her arms, holding him close as he continued to blink at the dragons. The tiny dragons clung to Raymond and nuzzled against her, their warmth a comforting presence. "Raymond," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "My precious Raymond, you are truly blessed." The room, still bathed in the soft glow of the dying embers, was filled with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. They knew they were witnessing something monumental, something that would change the course of history. And at the heart of it all was Prince Raymond Targaryen, the child who had survived the flames and brought dragons back to the world. In that moment, they all understood that their destinies were now inextricably linked with the tiny prince and his dragons. The future of House Targaryen, and perhaps all of Westeros, lay in the hands of Raymond and the dragons that now nestled around him. The Fireborne Prince. According to the books, Maester Corso died in the Summerhall tragedy, but in this story he survived because of Raymond's existence and the butterfly effects. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 29 comments 0 vote. Chapter 4. Flames and Dragons. Ryan floated in the void, the darkness pressing in on him from all sides. The scenes of knowledge and memories were gone and the emptiness around him was suffocating. He wanted to wake up, to test his newfound powers, but there was no exit from this limbo. As the monotony stretched on, his mind wandered. He thought of his old life, his mundane yet comforting routines, and the stark contrast to the perilous world he now found himself in. The Game of Thrones was no place for the faint-hearted, and Ryan knew he had to be prepared for the trials ahead. But how was he supposed to do that if he couldn't even wake up? Just as boredom began to take hold again, Ryan felt a sensation, a subtle shift in the darkness around him. It was as if something was touching him, enveloping his being. His vision flickered, and suddenly, he was no longer alone. In front of him floated 5 balls of flame, each a different color: red, green, gold, blue, and violet. They circled around him, their light flickering and dancing in the void. Ryan stared at them, entranced. He could almost hear voices within each flame, but as he listened closer, he realized they were not voices at all. They were roars, primal and powerful, calling out to him. The flames seemed to pulse with life, their colors shifting and blending at the edges. Ryan could feel an intense energy emanating from them, a raw power that both fascinated and terrified him. He reached out mentally, trying to understand their nature. Without warning, the red, blue, and violet flames surged upwards, their heat intensifying by the second. Ryan felt the scorching heat surround him, penetrating his very being. He screamed as the flames engulfed him, the pain almost unbearable. The roars grew louder, mingling with his own cries, until they became a cacophony of sound and fury. The heat spread through him, filling every part of his essence. It was as if the flames were burning away the last remnants of his old self, forging something new in the process. Ryan's vision blurred, then blackened entirely as the intensity of the experience overwhelmed him. When Ryan opened his eyes once more, he was surrounded by flames. His heart raced, and he screamed again, scared shitless. But something was different this time, he didn't feel any pain. It was weird, disorienting. A beat later, he finally realized he was awake, in his new infant body, surrounded by freaking fire. But he wasn't burning, nor was he hurting. His screams subsided into confused whimpers as he took in his surroundings. Flames licked the air around him, but they seemed to dance harmlessly, almost playfully. Ryan's small body felt a strange sensation, something moving all around him. Then he felt something climb onto his forehead. He blinked, trying to focus his infant eyes. He saw a dragon head. A baby dragon head, cooing at him as it tilted its head while peering down at him curiously. Its scales shimmering with shades of red and black. Soon, two more dragon hatchlings joined the first, one black with luminescent blue hues and the other black with violet highlights. They whined softly, vying for Ryan's attention. Ryan's mind struggled to process the sight. Baby dragons. But dragons nonetheless. He had read about them, seen them in shows, figurines, artworks, but this was real. Too real. What the fuck? He felt their body weights pressing down on him, and claws digging into his soft skin. They were half his size, closer to a third of his infant body. They looked massive to him. The sensation of being scooped up was peripheral, a distant awareness compared to the overwhelming fascination that gripped Ryan, now Raymond, as he stared at the dragons before him. His mother's trembling hands and tight embrace were barely registered, his entire being was fixated on the three reptilian creatures clinging to his infant form. He blinked several times, trying to process the sight before him. Each dragon had its own unique features, and he couldn't help but observe them in awe. The blue and black dragon had scales that were predominantly a deep, oceanic blue, with a glossy, almost metallic sheen that caught the light and reflected it in dazzling patterns. Interspersed among the blue were patches of jet black scales, creating an interplay of colors. Its eyes were a deep, enigmatic blue, reminiscent of the deepest parts of the ocean, and they seemed to hold ancient, primal secrets. His wings were delicate yet strong, with a dark blue membrane that had hints of bioluminescent glow, making him look like the dragon of the seas. The red and black dragon was a striking contrast of fiery hues and dark shadows. Its scales were a deep, glossy black, interspersed with patches of vibrant, blood red. The red seemed to shimmer like lava, especially along his spine and the edges of his wings. Then, astonishment hit Raymond like waves when he recognized the red and black dragon that was currently flapping his wings at him. It was Drogon, Daenerys, dragon from the show. He was fucking sure of it. And the realization sent a thrill of excitement through him, more intense than anything he'd ever felt. The last one was a violet and black dragon. His scales were a deep, rich violet, with black accents that gave him an air of sophistication. The violet scales had an iridescent quality, shifting colors subtly as the light played over them. Its eyes were a striking, intelligent violet, filled with a wisdom that seemed beyond his brother's. His wings were elegant, with a membrane that was almost translucent, showing hints of violet veins running through it. Out of his control, his baby mouth babbled in excitement, drool coming out of his small mouth. But he didn't care. This was too awesome. His little hands made grabby motions towards the dragons. Their presence was mesmerizing, and he was eager to catch every detail of their appearance. He didn't notice the odd crowd watching them, their eyes wide with amazement. All Raymond's attention was focused on the dragons, who seemed to enjoy his fascination. They nuzzled their faces against him, loving the attention he was giving them. The initial excitement of being surrounded by dragons was intoxicating, but suddenly, exhaustion hit him like waves crashing against the shore. His tiny body felt incredibly heavy, and a deep, overwhelming need to sleep began to take over. What the heck, why did he feel so tired? He wanted to stare at the dragons more, to feel their scales, to play with them. Confusion began to set in and Raymond finally seems to realize his current situation. But his energy was rapidly depleting, and confusion started to cloud his thoughts. He started to question what had happened. Where was he? Why were baby dragons here? Weren't they supposed to be extinct? Why was the first thing he saw, dragons? His thoughts were a whirlwind, but for the first time, he shifted his focus from the dragons to his new mother. He looked up at her and saw an expression of profound relief, awe, and exhaustion etched on her tear-stained face. Why was she crying? Her eyes, though tired, were filled with an intense love and protectiveness that made him feel a pang of something familiar and comforting. He looked around, trying to make sense of his surroundings, and he was stunned. Strangers, so many of them, were watching him with similar expressions of awe and reverence. One man wore a golden crown, his hair the same shade of silver blonde as his mother's. The king, Raymond realized. Which king? He hadn't got a clue. Next to him, he recognized the man who had helped his mother give birth. Then there was a group that looked like servants, and men clad in armor. Knights most likely. But why? Why were they looking at him like that? Before he could even begin to process the answers to his own questions, Raymond's eyes grew too heavy to keep open. His last sight was of the dragons, nuzzling close to him and his mother, before the darkness enveloped Raymond once more. The dragon's warmth still lingering on his skin and the questions swirling unanswered in his mind. Any ideas what to name these dragons? Or will you guys leave it to my horrible naming choices? I want to see if you guys have better ones than what I already came up with. XD. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 32 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5. A Spectacle. The corridors of the Red Keep buzzed with the soft murmurs of awe and reverence. The news of Prince Raymond's survival and the hatching of 3 dragons had spread like wildfire across the 7 kingdoms. Courtiers, servants, and guards alike craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the newborn prince and the legendary creatures that heralded a new era for House Targaryen. Prince Daenerys Targaryen, the second of his name, fiery and youthful at 15, made his way through the labyrinthine corridors, cradling his firstborn son Raymond, with pride. The baby, currently oblivious to the monumental expectations placed upon him, gazed around with wide, innocent eyes. He was cocooned in silken Targaryen swaddling and was an enigma to all who beheld him. Behind them, a retinue of servants and guards carefully carried the 3 dragon hatchlings, their eyes ever vigilant for any signs of danger or unrest. The dragons, still young and small but already exuding an aura of raw power, snapped at anyone who dared come too close to Raymond, their protective instincts fully aroused. Their presence was nothing short of a phenomenon. Meanwhile, Raymond reflected on the past week with a clarity that belied his infant form. It had been a blur of the typical newborn routine: sleeping, eating, pooping, the whole 9 yards. Yet, amidst these primal instincts, flickers of his adult consciousness emerged, trying to process this surreal new reality. He'd gathered, through snippets of overheard gossip and fragmented memories, that he'd narrowly escaped a fire at Summerhall. Once again, damn ironic, given that fire had claimed his life before. But this time, his Targaryen lineage protected him. He was immune to the flames. Thank fuck. During a so-called dragon sleep, the world had moved on without him. When Raymond finally awoke, the people around him regarded him with creepy worshipping eyes and awe. And unbeknownst to him, they say he had hatched 3 dragon eggs, a feat that had pulled him from his week-long coma. Crazy. Now, his father was going to show him off to his friends with the dragons. While being carried, Raymond observed the bustling activity of the Red Keep with wide, curious eyes. He was still uncertain about the current year, and that nagging sense of unease only grew with each passing day. But based on his observations, it seemed the timeline was situated a few years, or perhaps even decades, before the events of Game of Thrones began to unfold. Plagued by self-loathing, Raymond could only lament the fact that he had only managed to watch the very first episode of the first season in its entirety. Everything else he knew came from scattered social media clips and spoiler-filled snippets. He had intended to binge the entire series, but fate had cruelly intervened before he could even start. Still, Raymond was familiar with the core players, the Starks, whom he rather liked, the notorious Lannister twins and their scandalous incest, their psychotic son, Joffrey. He wanted to kill that bastard, and of course, Daenerys Targaryen. He had been particularly enthralled by the YouTube videos showcasing Dany and her cool dragons. And he knew of Jon Snow, the fabled prince that was promised, and the looming threat of the Night King and his undead army, the Winter Zombies. Despite this patchwork of knowledge, Raymond knew it was mostly useless and now realized it was far more complex because the main characters weren't even born yet. Oh, but his boy, Ned Stark, was alive. Raymond couldn't believe that the one man he grew attached to was fucking beheaded. Raymond would rather have been reborn into the Stark family than the Targaryens. With the Starks, he imagined he could have enjoyed a peaceful, quiet life, the kind of family-oriented environment he enjoys. Raymond appreciated the close-knit bonds of large families. But of course, instead, he was a Targaryen, where he found himself in a world rife with treachery, where one's life was always in peril, where spies were watching your every move. And the living conditions were simply abhorrent. Why didn't anyone ever invent hygiene? Like fuck, they had thousands of years to think about it. The moment he regained consciousness, the first thing to assault his senses was the stench of human waste. It was disgusting, a truly repulsive experience that made him yearn to get the fuck out and breathe in the fresh air. Winter air of the north, preferably. Having direwolves would have been nice. But since he's gotten 3 dragons, all is forgiven for now. As they approached the courtyard where Tywin Lannister and Steffon Baratheon awaited, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Tywin, already known for his sharp mind and calculating demeanor, stood with his arms crossed, his golden hair glinting in the sunlight. Beside him, Steffon, the young heir to Storm's End, could barely contain his excitement. His eyes were glued to the dragons as soon as they appeared within view, a look of sheer wonder etched on his face. Both young men had been summoned by Aerys to witness the marvel that had set the entire realm abuzz. Prince Aerys, Tywin greeted, his voice steady and respectful, though his gaze flickered to the dragons with fascination and wariness. "You've certainly brought a spectacle with you." Aerys smiled, a hint of the charm that had made him popular in court shining through. "Indeed, Tywin, meet my son, Raymond, and his 3 companions." He gestured to the dragons, who hissed softly. "Not 1, but 3 dragons. Born of stone eggs, no less." "It seems like a tale from old Valyria," Steffon exclaimed, his voice tinged with admiration. He stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the dragons. "Gods, have they been named yet?" he asked. Aerys shook his head. "No, Steffon, these dragons belong to Raymond, granted by father, King Jaehaerys. It will be his right to name them. They have already formed a bond with him, one that cannot be ignored." Raymond perked up his ears on the remark. Within the confines of his limited baby existence, his adult mind had found ways to stay entertained and engaged. One of those ways had been observing his 3 dragons and deciding on their names. The red and black dragon, once commonly referred to as Drogon, had quickly earned the name Stormfire. Raymond had chosen this name after watching the dragon's temperamental and aggressive nature unfold over the past week. Stormfire had bidden the most servants and guards out of the 3, a rebellious streak that made Raymond inwardly laugh every time he witnessed it. The name, Stormfire, captured his fiery spirit perfectly, embodying both his temperamental nature and his devastating power. Then there was the blue and black dragon, whom Raymond decided to name Poseidon. The dragon's coloring reminded him of the seas and oceans from his old world, and the name Poseidon seemed fitting. This dragon was the most affectionate and friendly of the 3, often seeking out caresses and attention from the family members. Poseidon's open-minded and loving nature made him a favorite among the royal household, and Raymond found a comforting sense of familiarity in naming him after the god of the sea. Lastly, the violet and black dragon was named Noctis. This dragon's dark attributes and colors, combined with his regal and intelligent nature, made the name Noctis feel right. He was the most observant and calm, often watching the world with an otherworldly calmness that could be unsettling. Noctis was quiet but commanded a presence that was impossible to ignore. The silent but scary type, Raymond thought. He wanted to share the names he had chosen with everyone, but as an infant who couldn't yet talk, he was forced to keep his thoughts to himself. He babbled incoherently, attempting to form the sounds, but it was no use. He would have to wait until he was older, perhaps 2 or 3 years old, before he could announce their names to the world. As Aerys sat down in an ornate chair between his friends with Raymond still in his arms, the young dragons flapped their wings and stated themselves around the 2. Servants and guards alike kept a respectful, if not fearful, distance. The dragon's scales gleamed under the midday sun, their eyes, fiery red, deep blue, and dark violet, radiating an almost otherworldly intelligence. Tywin, the pragmatist of the three, observed the creatures with fascination and caution. "This changes everything," he murmured, his voice low and contemplative. "The balance of power in the realm. House Targaryen's grip will tighten once more." Aerys nodded, his eyes alight with ambition. "Indeed, with these dragons, the Targaryen legacy shall rise from the ashes of Summerhall. Rhaemon, my son, my heir, is a symbol of our resurgence." The infant gurgled softly in his father's arms, seemingly oblivious to the weight of the expectations placed upon his tiny shoulders. Stormfire nuzzled closer to Rhaemon, his fiery nature tempered by an almost affectionate protectiveness. The other two followed suit, their primal and regal natures respectively evident in their movements. "Father believes Rhaemon to be the fulfillment of prophecy," Aerys continued, a note of reverence in his voice. "The prince that was promised. His survival from the flames and the hatching of these dragons, it cannot be mere coincidence." Tywin raised an eyebrow, his analytical mind already at work. "Prince Rhaemon is only 2 weeks old, and yet he has already become a figure of legend. Do you truly believe in the prophecy your father speaks of?" Aerys met Tywin's gaze, his expression solemn. "Why wouldn't I? Rhaemon has already brought 2 miracles since his birth. He survived the fire at Summerhall, and he brought dragons back into existence after a century and a half. Prophecies are the reason Targaryens survived the doom of Valyria. My son is destined for greatness." Stefan, though young, understood the gravity of the situation. "If the realm believes, it will rally behind your house. Faith can be a powerful ally." Tywin's measuring gaze met Aerys. "But faith alone won't secure the throne. Your son's miracle has given us an opportunity, but it also paints a target on his back. Envy and fear are potent motivators for those who seek to undermine your house." Aerys smiled, a hint of the future Mad King's intensity flickering in his eyes. "Let them come. Let them see the power of House Targaryen reborn. Rhaemon and his dragons will be the beacon that guides us through the darkness. And I, Aerys Targaryen, will ensure that our fire never fades." The sun cast a warm glow over the training grounds, where 3 young noble heirs sat around a sturdy wooden table. The air buzzed with the sounds of clashing swords and the distant murmur of courtly life. As they continued their talk, Tywin Lannister's sharp mind was already working through the implications of recent events. He glanced at Aerys, his expression thoughtful. "Aerys," Tywin began, choosing his words carefully, "I've heard that King Jaehaerys plans to host a great tournament in 3 months to celebrate the birth of the twins and the return of dragons. With the Band of 9 uprising looming, do you think it's wise to divert our resources and attention to such a spectacle?" Aerys's expression momentarily hardened, his Targaryen pride bristling at the perceived challenge to his father's decision. "You question the king's judgment, Tywin?" he asked, his tone cold. Tywin met Aerys's gaze steadily. "I mean no disrespect, Aerys, my friend. I'm merely concerned about the timing and the potential risks." Aerys took a deep breath, his initial defensiveness giving way to a more measured response. "My father is a wise man, Tywin. The tournament is not just a celebration, it's a strategic move. He understands the importance of morale. The people need something to look forward to, something to rally behind. The tragedy at Summerhall has cast a long shadow, and the threat of the Band of 9 adds to the unrest. A grand tournament will serve as a distraction, a means to uplift the spirits of the realm and shift focus from the impending war." Stefan nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So, it's about giving the people hope. A reason to believe in a brighter future." "Exactly," Aerys replied, his tone softening. "I must admit, there was a time when I didn't fully trust my father's decisions. When he commanded that I marry my sister, Rhaella, I resisted. I couldn't see the necessity or the fairness of it all when both my grandfather, Aegon V, and my father married for love." He glanced down at Rhaemon, a soft smile playing on his lips. "But ever since Rhaemon was born, my perspective has changed. His birth, his survival, the return of dragons, these are signs. I now understand the wisdom in my father's decisions. I'm glad I married my sister-wife, Rhaella, and trusted in my father's vision." Tywin couldn't help but be surprised by this. He observed his friend silently, contemplating his sudden change of view. There's another significant reason for the tournament, Aerys said, his tone growing more serious. Half of the Kingsguard perished in the Summerhall tragedy, including the Lord Commander, Sir Duncan the Tall. My father, King Jaehaerys, sees the tournament as an opportunity to find new knights worthy of the Kingsguard. Tywin's eyes sharpened with interest. A wise move. The Kingsguard is the backbone of the realm's security. Finding replacements quickly is essential. Aerys nodded. Indeed, the tournament will be grand and expansive, with all the noble houses invited to attend the celebration feast. It will not only serve as a distraction and a morale booster but also as a means to scout for the finest knights in Westeros. The best of the best will be tested in the lists, and those who prove themselves will be considered for the honor of joining the Kingsguard. Stefan looked impressed. A grand tournament is a surefire way to attract the most skilled warriors. And with the noble houses in attendance, it will also strengthen alliances and foster unity. Tywin stroked his chin thoughtfully. And with all the noble houses in attendance, it will also serve as a platform for political maneuvering. New alliances can be forged, and existing ones strengthened. It's a masterstroke. Aerys looked up at Tywin and Stefan, his expression earnest. You both should put your trust in our king as well. The future of the royal family and the Seven Kingdoms is brighter than it has been in a long time. We must stand united, with faith in our leadership, to navigate the challenges ahead. Tywin nodded, his respect for Aerys growing. You make a compelling case, Aerys. I will trust in King Jaehaerys' judgment and do my part to support the realm. Stefan grinned, his youthful enthusiasm undiminished. And I'll do the same. Together, we'll ensure that the future remains bright. Aerys, leaning back with an air of casual authority, watched with amusement as the dragons lazed about. Poseidon rested atop the table in front of him, his oceanic wings folded neatly to his sides. Suddenly, Poseidon stirred, straightening up and spreading his magnificent wings. He let out a roar, which sounded more like a plaintive whine, directed at Aerys. Aerys chuckled, recognizing the signal. Without a word, he gestured to the waiting servants, who hurried forward with trays of roasted meat. They placed the platters cautiously in the center of the table, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Stormfire, the first to react, lunged at the meat with a ferocious appetite, tearing into his share with primal vigor. Poseidon, not a second later, joined in, playfully engaging in a tug-of-war with his brother over a particularly juicy piece. Their playful struggle drew smiles and laughter from the onlookers. Noctis observed his siblings with a regal patience before gracefully approaching the platter. He took his share without haste, his movements unruffled and calm. Tywin, Stefan, and Aerys watched the scene unfold with fascination. The dragons, a symbol of House Targaryen's ancient power, were a sight to behold, their behavior both inspiring and a reminder of the volatile nature of these magnificent creatures. Aerys, still holding Raymond, broke the silence. We tried to separate the dragons from Raymond, he said casually, his tone betraying a hint of frustration. But they didn't take kindly to it. Wildly aggressive, they were. Several servants got bitten for their troubles. Tywin's eyes narrowed slightly, his calculating mind already assessing the implications. Dragons are fiercely loyal creatures. Their bond with Raymond must be exceptionally strong. Stefan nodded in agreement. The trio of noble heirs fell into contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts of the future. The dragons, having finished their meal, settled back into their resting positions, their bellies full and their loyalty unwavering. The courtyard, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, bore witness to the beginning of a new chapter in the history of House Targaryen, one that promised to be as fiery and unpredictable as the dragons themselves. Hey guys, I'm officially continuing this story. I honestly didn't expect a lot of people to like this story. I'm honored, but please don't expect a regular update schedule, especially since I'll be going on a month-long vacation in another country soon. Thanks for the reviews. Tell me what you think of the names. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 24 comments 0 vote. Chapter 6. A Spectacle. 2. Joanna Lannister was many things, but a fool she was not. From her earliest days, she was keenly aware of her beauty, a gift that turned many heads. She also knew well the privilege of her birth, for she hailed from one of the great noble houses of Westeros. Though her father, Jason Lannister, was but the second son of the Lord of Castle Rock, she wanted for nothing in wealth and position. Yet, she was but one among many children, and her father's attentions were spread thin. Joanna, however, yearned to be his favored. She needed the right alliances and backing to rise above her station. Possessing a maturity beyond her years, she understood this well. She employed her wits and the knowledge she had garnered to outshine her siblings. She comported herself as a proper lady and wielded her beauty like a weapon when it served her purpose. Now, she found herself in King's Landing, a lady-in-waiting to Princess Rhaella, the future queen. But she was not blind to the glances Prince Aerys had cast her way during the royal family's visits to Castle Rock. Aerys had wanted her. She had braced herself for his advances upon her arrival at court. Yet, to her astonishment, Aerys refrained. His glances were no longer filled with desire or lust, they were tinged with regret and pity. It seemed he had forsaken his pursuit of her entirely. The reason for this eluded her, but she was grateful nonetheless. She had no desire for Aerys or to be his paramour, her heart inclined toward her cousin, Tywin. Still, she pondered what had caused the persistent prince to abandon his chase. Living in the Red Keep as Rhaella's lady-in-waiting afforded her ample opportunity to observe the royal family closely. Her answer lay with the newborn princes, the twins. Specifically, it was the Fireborne Prince, Rhaemon Targaryen. She had witnessed it all. The prince's entrance into a dragon-like slumber, the king's bestowal of the remaining dragon eggs upon the infant, and the miraculous moment when the prince erupted into flames, fire enveloping his cradle and the eggs, bringing dragons back into the world. She was stunned and awed, as any would be. It was beyond belief, yet she had heard of the miracle that spared the prince from the flames of Summerhall unscathed. Since that day, the royal family's focus had never wavered from the babe. This included Aerys, so much so that she surmised he had forsaken his pursuit of her because of it. Somehow, all of Aerys's attention was now devoted to his wife and sons. Joanna knew well that the royal siblings had wed against their wills. Now, it seemed that reluctance had vanished, all due to Prince Rhaemon and his singular existence. Joanna Lannister walked with measured grace behind Princess Rhaella, flanked by the other ladies-in-waiting, as they made their way through the bustling corridors of the Red Keep. The air was thick with anticipation and the clamor of preparations for the great tourney, now mere days away. Princess Rhaella issued commands with a serene authority, ensuring every detail was attended to for the grand event. King's Landing had never been so alive with activity. The streets and halls teemed with a motley throng of wandering knights, sellswords, squires, wards, pages, merchants, tourists, and, she could go on for ages. It was the busiest Joanna had ever seen the capital, the city strained to its limits by the influx of visitors. High lords and ladies had already begun to arrive, with many more expected in the coming days. Despite the chaos, Joanna understood the draw that had brought them all here. Whispers of dragons reborn under Targaryen rule and the enigmatic figure of the Fireborne Prince had spread like wildfire across Westeros. The mere notion of living dragons was enough to ignite the imaginations of nobles and common folk alike. Dragons had long been relegated to the realm of myth and legend, their extinction in the mists of time leaving only stories and faded memories. To hear that they had returned was beyond belief. And then there was the matter of the Fireborne Prince, Rhaemon Targaryen. The tales of his miraculous immunity to fire had sent shockwaves through the realm. Not since the days of Aegon the Conqueror had there been such a claim, and even then, it was shrouded in doubt and speculation. Joanna herself could scarcely believe it, though she had witnessed the prince's extraordinary nature with her own eyes. It was no surprise that so many had come to see for themselves, to discern the truth of these wondrous claims. As she followed in the princess's wake, Joanna's mind churned with thoughts of the days to come. The great tourney would be a spectacle unmatched, a gathering of the realm's finest and most powerful. But beneath the pageantry and knightly valor, there would be scrutiny and whispers, eyes watching for any sign of weakness or deceit. The Targaryens' hold on power was as fragile as it was formidable, and the return of dragons, along with the Fireborne Prince, would either solidify their dominion or invite new challenges. In the midst of it all, Joanna knew her place. She was a Lannister and her role was to serve and observe. Yet, the intrigue of this momentous time stirred something deeper within her. The return of dragons, the emergence of a prince immune to flames, it was a story worthy of the songs of old, and she, somehow, was a part of it. For a moment, her hidden ambitions reared its head, and suddenly, she was determined to make her future children be a part of it as well. But it was too soon to even think about it. As they neared the end of their circuit around the Red Keep, Joanna cast a glance over the bustling courtyard below. The throngs of people moved like a river of humanity, each one drawn by the promise of witnessing history. She could not blame them. She too was captivated by the unfolding saga, by the promise of dragons and the destiny of a prince. The days ahead would shape the future of the realm, and she, like so many others, would be there to see it. The first day of the tourney dawned bright and clear, the air alive with the vibrant hum of anticipation. Songs spilled from the lips of entertainers, filling the grounds with melodies that danced in the summer breeze. Guards stood vigilant at every corner, their eyes sharp for any hint of trouble. Ladies of the court scouted the grounds, searching for their champions among the throngs of knights and men-at-arms who eagerly entered their names for the competitions. Amidst the revelry, the petty crimes of thievery by beggars and common folk surged, a constant undercurrent to the grand festivities. As the time for the main event approached, the jousting competition, the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. The stands filled to capacity, a sea of faces turned towards the arena, waiting with bated breath for the arrival of the royal family. When at last they appeared, settling into their high seats in the center of the arena, a collective murmur of awe swept through the assemblage. Rumors and whispers had spread like wildfire across the Seven Kingdoms, but now the people saw the truth with their own eyes. There, carried with regal grace, was their proof. King Jaehaerys carried a dragon. It was a small thing that had jet-black scales and blue highlights. The sight of the mythical creature, long thought extinct, left the crowd in stunned silence. Yet, the twin babes and the other two rumored dragons were notably absent, perhaps kept away from the noise and clamor for the sake of their infant sensibilities, a detail most found understandable. King Jaehaerys rose, his presence commanding instant attention. His voice carried across the arena, clear and authoritative as he started his opening speech and announced the promotion of Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, to the esteemed position of Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. The crowd responded with a roar of approval, the White Bull's reputation well known and respected throughout the realm. But the king was not finished. He spoke of a need for new blood among the Kingsguard, a call for worthy knights to step forward and prove their mettle. This announcement sent a ripple of thrill and excitement through the assembled participants, each one eager for the chance to join the ranks of the realm's most elite protectors. The tourney grounds buzzed with renewed energy, the promise of glory and honor hanging thick in the air. Knights and squires alike whispered of the possibilities, their eyes alight with ambition. For the common folk, the spectacle and pageantry provided a welcome distraction from the harshness of daily life, a chance to witness feats of valor and skill. As the jousting began, lances splintering and horses thundering down the lists, all eyes remained fixed on the arena. The sun hung high in the sky, casting its golden warmth upon the tourney grounds. On the raised platform, amidst the grandeur of the noble seats, King Jaehaerys sat with regal bearing, flanked by his queen and their kin. Behind him, standing tall in their gleaming armor, were Sir Gerald Hightower, and the young but already storied Sir Barristan Selmy, the Bold. Sir Barristan, in his 20s but possessing the demeanor of a seasoned warrior, leaned slightly towards Sir Gerald. The field is strong this year, Sir Gerald. Many skilled knights have come to prove themselves. Do you see any amongst them who might be worthy of the white cloak? Sir Gerald's eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the list of competitors. There are a few with potential, he replied, his voice steady. Sir Gawain Gaunt has shown promise. And there is Sir Jonathor Derry, a knight of impeccable honor and courage. Both could serve well in the Kingsguard. Sir Barristan nodded in agreement, his eyes following a knight who had just enhorsed his opponent with a swift, decisive strike. Sir Gaunt is indeed formidable. His skill with the spear is unmatched. And Sir Derry's loyalty is beyond reproach. They would bring strength and honor to our ranks. As the knights continued to clash in the lists below, King Jaehaerys turned slightly in his seat, catching the conversation of his stalwart guards. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of command. Sir Gerald, Sir Barristan, we must also look beyond the immediate need for the Kingsguard. The realm grows ever more dangerous, and the shadows lengthen around us. Both knights inclined their heads, listening intently as the king continued. In the future, I shall appoint sworn swords for my grandsons, Raymond and Rhaegar. They will need men of unwavering loyalty and proven valor. Men who can protect them from the myriad dangers that lie ahead. Sir Gerald's gaze hardened with resolve. Your Grace, we will ensure that only the finest and most trustworthy men are chosen, both for the Kingsguard and for the protection of the princes. It is our duty, and we shall not falter. Sir Barristan, ever earnest, added, "We will seek out those who embody the virtues of knighthood, both here and across Westeros." Jaehaerys gave a solemn nod, his eyes momentarily drifting to the crowd, where faces of all stations watched with rapt attention. The times are changing. With the return of dragons and the rise of new threats, our vigilance must be unyielding. The future of House Targaryen, and the realm itself, depends on it. The tourney continued, lances shattering and the clang of steel echoing through the air. Sir Gerald and Sir Barristan resumed their watchful scrutiny, their minds already turning to the daunting task ahead. In the midst of the spectacle and splendor, they stood as silent sentinels, guardians of a legacy that stretched back to Aegon the Conqueror and forward into an uncertain future. As the knights below fought for glory and honor, Sir Gerald and Sir Barristan fought a quieter, more profound battle, to ensure that the shield of the Targaryens remained unbroken, protecting the flame that had once more begun to burn brightly. The time skip is coming. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 25 comments 0 vote. Chapter 7. Worries of a Mother. 263 AC. The sun cast a gentle glow over the courtyard in the Red Keep, bathing the scene in a warm, golden light. Rhaella Targaryen, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, sat serenely at a table. The delicate aroma of herbal tea filled the air as she engaged in conversation with Grand Maester Pycelle and Maester Corso. Her hand rested protectively on the gentle swell of her belly, a sign of the life growing within her. Her relationship with Aerys had been improving steadily ever since she had her twins. She noticed the change that had taken place in her brother. They were no means a passionate couple, no. But they've come to terms and settled with the idea of being a married pair. Aerys no longer shamed her by seeking other women. He became kinder and more understanding of her, and raised a goal to be a good example for their children. Maester Pycelle, I understand your concerns, but it is my duty as queen to attend important events, especially the wedding of Tywin and Joanna, Rhaella said, her voice steady yet filled with a hint of frustration. She had made great friends with Joanna these past years and she wanted to be there in support. Pycelle, his face creased with concern, shook his head slowly. Your Grace, I must insist. The wedding itself will be taxing. You are almost due, and any undue strain could be harmful to both you and the child. Maester Corso, equally apprehensive, added, we only wish for your safety and the health of the royal child. It would be wise to avoid any unnecessary stress and actions. Rhaella sighed, her eyes reflecting her inner conflict. She understood the Maester's concerns, but her sense of duty and loyalty to her family and the realm weighed heavily on her heart. Before she could respond, the sound of armored footsteps approached. Sir Barristan Selmy, the epitome of knightly honor and one of the finest swordsmen in the realm, bowed deeply before the queen. Your Grace, may I have a moment of your time? Sir Barristan asked, his voice respectful but urgent. Rhaella gestured gracefully for him to continue. Of course, Sir Barristan. What news do you bring? Sir Barristan straightened, his expression one of pride and solemnity. The promising recruits have officially passed their training, Your Grace. They are now ready to swear their loyalties as sworn swords for the princess. Rhaella's eyes lit up with pride and relief. Her sons, Rhaemon and Rhaegar, were growing stronger and more capable every day. The addition of new knights to their service would ensure their protection and further solidify their positions within the realm. Rhaella responded to Sir Barristan's news with a stern nod, her piercing gaze steady on the Kingsguard knight. The courtyard fell into a respectful silence, waiting on the queen. After a moment, she broke the silence. Sir Barristan, do you recall how you came to be a member of the Kingsguard? The knight, ever humble and respectful, replied promptly, yes, Your Grace. It was thanks to your recommendation to King Jaehaerys, a week after the princes were born. Rhaella sipped her tea thoughtfully, her eyes never leaving Barristan. Do you know why I did it? Sir Barristan paused, reflecting on the question before answering honestly, forgive me, Your Grace, I do not. He clearly remembered that few had disapproved of the idea, but now that he had proved himself in the recent war by slaying Maleysai Blackfyre in a single combat, ending the male line of the Blackfyre pretenders, no one dared to question his worthiness, his station in the Kingsguard anymore. A faint smile touched Rhaella's lips. You left an impression on me when you enhorsed my uncle, Duncan, in a tourney. At first, I wanted you to be assigned as a sworn sword to my son, Rhaemon. But at the last minute, I recommended you to my father as a Kingsguard. Do you know why? Barristan's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he remained silent, allowing the queen to continue. Because Raymond would be king in the future either way, Rayella confessed. It was the right choice, especially with the pressing need for new members in the Kingsguard back then. The War of the Ninnepenny Kings soon followed, and we needed every capable knight we could muster. Sworn swords could wait. Barristan nodded in understanding, his respect for the queen deepening. Thank you, Your Grace, for your support and belief in my skills. I am honored. Rayella's gaze softened as she continued, I am glad you proved your worth in the war, Sir Barristan. I hope these potential recruits for my sons will do the same. You and Sir Gerald have trained them well, I trust. The hidden message in her words was clear. She wanted only the best for her sons, and she was relying on Barristan to ensure that the recruits were capable and worthy. The knight understood the gravity of her expectations. Your Grace, I assure you, they are ready, Barristan replied firmly. They have shown great promise and dedication. They will serve your sons well. That is wonderful news, Sir Barristan, Rayella said, a smile gracing her lips. Please arrange for a ceremony to be held in the Great Hall. I would like to witness their oaths myself. Sir Barristan bowed once more. As you command, Your Grace. I shall see to it immediately. As Sir Barristan departed to make the necessary arrangements, Queen Rayella turned back to the maesters, her resolve fortified. I will heed your counsel and refrain from attending the wedding. My place is here, with my family and my unborn child. Grand Maester Pycelle and Maester Corso exchanged relieved glances, their expressions softening. Thank you, Your Grace, Pycelle said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. Your health and the health of your child are of utmost importance. As the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Rayella's thoughts wandered to the events of the past few years. Following the great tourney at King's Landing, the royal family of King Jaehaerys, her brother-husband Aerys, herself, and her twins, along with Raymond's 3 dragons, relocated to Dragonstone. Meanwhile, her parents, King Jaehaerys and Queen Shera remained in King's Landing. During the reign of Jaehaerys, the War of the Ninnepenny Kings erupted. This conflict saw the Band of Nine, a coalition of merchants, mercenaries, and pirates from the free cities, challenge the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. After the Band of Nine seized the Stepstones, King Jaehaerys II Targaryen, aware of their ambition to conquer the 7 kingdoms for the last Blackfyre pretender, Maleys Blackfyre, dispatched an army to the Stepstones to vanquish the foes of the Iron Throne. Many perished in that war, including the Hand of the King, Lord Ormond Baratheon, and Sir Jason Lannister. Not long after, the King and Queen of the 7 kingdoms succumbed to illness together. King Jaehaerys, her father, was already plagued by numerous ailments throughout his life and he died at the young age of 37, leaving behind a legacy of amiability and cleverness, yet marred by his frailty. As heir, Prince Daenerys Targaryen, alongside herself and their 2 sons, relocated to King's Landing after his succession to the Iron Throne in the morning of his father's short-lived reign. Before King Jaehaerys' demise, he had selected 4 promising men to be trained alongside the Kingsguard. These men were to reach a level of strength and prowess befitting sworn shields for his grandsons. Jaehaerys was a fair man, he sought no favoritism between the twins, knowing their family history, and decreed that each would have 2 sworn swords to follow them once they turned 5 years of age. Aerys, though differing from his father, intended to honor this decree. Yet, Aerys openly favored Raymond, and she knew, he was not alone in this regard. Many lords and ladies of the court preferred Raymond over Rhaegar. It was not difficult to see why. Raymond, the firstborn and heir to the Iron Throne, was unique. Rayella had observed her sons closely over the past 4 years. Raymond, a dragon lord with 3 dragons to his name, was immune to fire. And though twins, Raymond and Rhaegar were polar opposites. Rhaegar, her sweet baby, was quiet, sensitive, studious, and well-behaved. Raymond, on the other hand, was loud, charismatic, energetic, and charming, with clear adorable hate for reading. Despite their differences, the brothers shared a harmonious bond and Rayella loved both of them beyond measure. And she dearly hopes that it stays that way in the future. As the sunlight filtered through the courtyard, casting dappled patterns on the ground, Rayella turned her attention back to the maesters, her expression clouded with concern. There is another matter I wish to discuss, she began, her voice tinged with unease. It concerns Raymond and his recent dreams. Grand Maester Pycelle and Maester Corso exchanged curious glances, their faces attentive, signaling her to go on. Rayella took a deep breath, recalling the unsettling experience of a fortnight past. Raymond came to me a fortnight ago, she continued, her gaze distant as she relived the moment. He spoke of a strange dream he had. Dreams about dragons teaching him how to wield fire. Naturally, I was shocked. I alerted Aerys right away, believing Raymond without question. If anyone in our family were to have dragon dreams, it would be him. Pycelle's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise, while Corso leaned in, intrigued. And what did the king say? Pycelle inquired. Aerys believed him as well, Rayella replied. We questioned Raymond about the dreams, and he claimed he could understand and speak with the dragon in his dream. This was no ordinary prophetic vision, as some Targaryens have had. It is different, something we have no records of interpreting. Maester Corso rubbed his chin thoughtfully. A different kind of dragon dream, you say? This is indeed unusual. Did Raymond describe the dragon in detail? Rayella nodded. He did. He spoke of a great, ancient dragon, larger than any we have seen, with scales that shimmered like molten gold. The dragon spoke to him, instructed him in the ways of fire. It was as if the dragon were a mentor, a guide. Pycelle cleared his throat, his voice carrying the weight of years of wisdom. Your Grace, dreams can be powerful, especially for the Targaryen lineage. However, it is not unheard of for children to have vivid imaginations. We must tread carefully. Rayella's eyes sparkled with maternal worry. I understand, Grand Maester. But I will not brush Raymond's dreams away. They were not mere flights of fancy. I believe there is something more to this, something we must understand. Maester Corso nodded in agreement. Indeed, Your Grace. We have no choice but to observe and see what unfolds. Raymond is still a child. It is possible that as he grows older, these dreams may become more frequent or reveal more about his abilities. Pycelle added, for now, we must treat them as dreams, albeit extraordinary ones. If Raymond truly possesses the ability to wield fire, it will manifest in due time. Until then, we should document these dreams and monitor his development closely. Rayella sighed, her heart heavy with the weight of her son's potential destiny. Very well, we shall watch and wait. But know this, Maesters, Raymond is special, and I believe his dreams hold a deeper significance. We must be prepared for whatever may come. Alright guys, I'm finally done with the fundamental history. Thank God. Next chapter we're back with Raymond and his path to greatness. XD. NobleVillainess creators thoughts. 39 comments 0 vote. Chapter 8. The Beginning. 264 AC. In the royal compartments of the central keep, in that tallest and most fortified part of the Red Keep, the soft light of dawn filtered through the narrow window of Raymond's chamber, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The room was simple yet dignified, befitting his status as a Targaryen prince. However, the grandeur of his lineage was far from his mind as he stood in the center of the room, his small form poised in a northern Shaolin kung fu stance. Raymond's breaths were measured and deep, a testament to the discipline he had cultivated over the past few years. His body, though still that of a child, moved with a precision and intent far beyond his years. Each stance, each flow, was executed with an almost obsessive attention to detail, drawn from the vivid memories that were now an intrinsic part of him. His frustration mounted with every failed attempt to produce fire. He could feel the energy within him, a latent power that seemed just out of reach. The fire was there, he was certain of it, yet it refused to manifest. Every time he extended his palm, expecting the familiar warmth and flicker of flames, there was nothing but the cool morning air. With a grunt of exertion, Raymond shifted into another stance, his movements fluid and graceful. He had spent hours upon hours practicing, refining his techniques, and mastering his breathing control. His dedication was unwavering, driven by a desire to harness the powers he believed were his by right. Yet, as the moments ticked by without success, doubt began to creep in. Why won't it work? He muttered to himself, his voice tinged with frustration. I've done everything right. The breathing, the stances. Why can't I produce the flames? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his own rapid breathing, opposite to the calm, controlled breaths he had been practicing. He forced himself to slow down, closing his eyes and focusing inward. He visualized the flame, small and flickering, nestled deep within his core. He tried to coax it out, willing it to travel up through his body and out into his palm. But again, there was nothing. With an exasperated sigh, Raymond sagged to the floor, the cold stone a stark reminder of his failure. He drew his knees to his chest, feeling the weight of his own expectations pressing down on him. He had been training for years, years that felt like an eternity to someone so young, and yet he had nothing to show for it. "Why can't I do it?" he whispered, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. He ran a hand through his sweaty platinum blonde hair. "Fuck, what am I doing wrong?" As he sat there, the memories of his past life and the knowledge he had gained from his reincarnation swirled within him. They were a part of him now, influencing his thoughts and actions, merging with his own personality. It was a strange, disorienting experience, and he often felt like he was caught between four worlds. After a few moments of sitting in silence, Raymond gave up for the day and laid down on his back, staring up at the ceiling. His mind wandered back to the early years of his infancy, when he had focused solely on meditation and mastering his breathing control. For the first 2 years of his new life, he had done nothing but meditate, honing his inner strength and control. Then, for the past 3 years, he had dedicated himself to training the basic movements and stances of the firebending martial arts. Turning his head to the side, his gaze fell upon the fireplace where 2 of his dragonstone eggs lay resting. The eggs were a constant reminder of his unique and incredible power he held. He thought about how he had hatched Poseidon, Noctis, and Stormfire. He remembered the void, the colored flames, the intense fire that had erupted from him, flames that were entirely his own that hatched the 3 eggs but 2. Why did only 3 of them hatch? He wondered aloud. What was different about those moments compared to now? He pondered this question, trying to recall every detail of that fateful day. During the time when he was still in coma, the void, the darkness, and then the flames, the overwhelming pain that brought his dragons to life, and his consciousness coming back into the living. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered emotion and instinct. He needed to produce his own flames again, he thought resolutely, determination rekindling within him. I need to feel that same intensity, that same drive. If I can do that, maybe I can hatch the other 2 eggs. Raymond knew he had the ability to produce the flames. If he had done it before, he could do it again. He just needed to find the right trigger, the right spark to ignite the fire within him. Raymond was brought out of his musings when a knock echoed from his door. A clear, loud voice greeted him through the thick wood. "Good morning, Prince Raymond. It's time to get up and ready yourself to break your fast with the royal family." Raymond sighed softly, pushing himself up from the cold floor. "I'm already awake, Sir Oswald," he called back, his voice carrying a hint of cheerfulness despite his earlier frustrations. The door creaked open, and Sir Oswald Frey entered, a tall-looking young man with lean muscles, decked in armor. He was followed closely by an older-looking man, a head shorter but with a larger stature than him, and several servants carrying towels, a bucket of water, and fresh clothes. The servants immediately began their routine, fussing over Raymond to help him prepare for the day. "Good morning, everyone," Raymond greeted them cheerfully, his bright smile lighting up the room. The servants, already accustomed to their prince's charms and childlike cuteness, smiled back warmly and replied with their own greetings. They were honored to serve a prince who treated them with such kindness. Dagmar, yawning loudly, stretched his arms as he entered the room. Sir Oswald shot him a disapproving look, his posture stiffening as he scolded, "Mind your manners, Dagmar. We're in the presence of the prince." Dagmar rolled his eyes and shrugged, his expression brash and unapologetic. "It's too early for me to be dealing with your issues on manners and whatnot, Oswald." Raymond laughed, a sound that filled the room with warmth. "It's all right, Sir Oswald. Don't mind it." "I don't." The knight's stern expression softened at Raymond's words, though he still cast a wary glance at Dagmar, who smirked in response. Raymond found the duo amusing, Sir Oswald, the disciplined and loyal knight, and Dagmar, the brash yet skilled Bravo Sea sellsword. They were an odd pair, but their dynamic intrigued him. Sir Oswald was only 18, knighted at 16 and one of many elder sons of Walder Frey. His dedication and loyalty were unwavering, and he had a calm yet determined demeanor. Dagmar, on the other hand, was 28, a seasoned warrior who had honed his skills in the cutthroat underworld of Bravos. His carefree attitude and blunt mannerisms often clashed with Oswald's disciplined nature, but Raymond liked them both. As the servants continued to help Raymond get dressed, he observed his sworn swords with a fond smile. They were a funny duo in his eyes, opposites in many ways but both skilled in the art of the sword. His grandfather had chosen them well, and they had trained with the Kingsguard for 2 years before swearing their oaths to him. Once he was dressed and ready, Raymond looked at his guards and the servants, his eyes sparkling with gratitude. "Thank you, everyone." Oswald nodded respectfully, and Dagmar gave a casual salute, his smirk still in place. The servants bowed and began to tidy up the room. "Let's go and break our fast," Raymond said, leading the way. As Raymond made his way through the corridors of the Red Keep, multiple servants greeted him warmly, bowing as he passed. Raymond greeted each of them back with a bright smile, his cheerful demeanor lighting up the early morning. The guards stationed at each corner acknowledged him with respectful nods, and he returned the gesture with a wave, his small frame exuding a noble yet approachable air. Oswald and Dagmar followed closely behind, their contrasting personalities evident in their mannerisms. Oswald walked with a disciplined stride, ever alert, while Dagmar sauntered leisurely, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced nonchalance. As Raymond neared the dining area, excitement bubbled within him. He broke into a run, his youthful energy propelling him forward. He burst through the doors with a wide grin, his voice ringing out, "Good morning." The dining hall was already filled with the presence of his family. His father, King Aerys II, sat at the head of the table with a commanding presence, his mother, Rhaella, cradled baby Shera in her arms, and his twin brother, Rhaegar, sat quietly, acknowledging Raymond's entrance with a sleepy nod. "Good morning, my little dragon," Rhaella greeted warmly, her eyes filled with maternal affection. "How did you sleep?" Raymond beamed at his mother. "I slept well, mother. Thank you." Aerys grinned widely, his eyes twinkling with pride as he regarded his eldest son. "Look at you, Raymond, full of high spirits even in the morning. Come, sit and eat." Raymond eagerly took his place beside Rhaegar, his stomach growling in anticipation. Training had been exhausting, and he was ravenous. He started piling food onto his plate with gusto, his thoughts momentarily drifting to the times he had passed out from overexertion as a baby. He remembered how he had fallen asleep right after hatching the dragon eggs, the effort too much for his small body to handle at the time. As he focused on his meal, he heard a soft cooing sound. Lifting his head, he saw baby Shera looking at him from Rhaella's arms, her tiny face lighting up with a giggle as he made a funny face at her. Her laughter was infectious, and Raymond's heart swelled with affection for his new sister. Shera was a miracle, the first and last sister he and Rhaegar would have. Rhaella had endured a difficult labor to bring her into the world, and Grand Maester Pycelle had warned them that Shera might not have survived without their mother risking her own life. Rhaella's determination and strength had prevailed, but it had come at a cost. She could no longer bear children. Raymond's thoughts briefly turned to the future he remembered from his past life. Without Viserys and Daenerys, the future was even more uncertain. But as he looked around the table at his family, he realized that he didn't care all that much. He had grown to love his new family deeply, and he adored his little sister. He would protect them himself, no matter what challenges lay ahead. "Raymond, your training must be going well," Aerys commented, watching his son devour his breakfast. "You have quite the appetite." Raymond grinned between bites. "Yes, father. Training is hard, but it makes me hungry." He found it increasingly burdensome to conceal the fact that he had already undertaken the arduous task of training his physique and enacting peculiar movements, akin to the ancient arts of combat. When he was merely 4 name days, he felt compelled to spin a tale of dragon dreams and nonsensical claims of an ancient dragon instructing him in the ways of fire and its wielding. Once his family were swayed by these fanciful accounts, Raymond freely commenced his physical training, no longer confined to the secrecy of his own chambers. Often he would practice his stances in the courtyards or other open spaces, drawing the curious gaze of onlookers. Yet, these observers remained perplexed, for the martial disciplines he employed, the northern Shaolin practices and the kendo swordplay, were foreign to the realm of plaintoes. Only the occasional knights, interested by these strange movements, would pause to watch him. But they quickly departed once Raymond informed them that he had learned these techniques through his dragon-inspired visions. Aerys laughed heartily, the sound echoing through the hall. "Good. A strong appetite means a strong body. Keep up the hard work, my son." As the family meal wound down, Rhaella gently dabbed at Shera's mouth with a cloth and looked up at her husband and sons. "I received a raven earlier this morning from Lady Joanna," she announced. She wrote to say that she is expecting to give birth in the coming weeks. Aerys nodded thoughtfully. Tywin should arrive back at Castle Rock in due time, then. Good thing I dismissed him a month ago for a long vacation to support his lady wife during her labor. He won't be returning for a few months. Raymond listened intently, assuming quietly that Lady Joanna was most likely going to give birth to the twins. Jaime and Cersei Lannister. Aerys turned his attention to Raymond, his expression serious but affectionate. Raymond, I want you to come with me to attend the small council meeting later. It is time for you to start learning and observing how to rule. Raymond's eyes lit up with excitement. Finally, he thought, a chance to start suggesting ideas to help improve the Seven Kingdoms. Even though he knew they probably wouldn't take a 5-year-old's words seriously, he hoped to start ingraining his ideas and proving his brilliance to them. Yes, father, he replied enthusiastically, before turning his attention back to his dessert. As he took a bite of his sweet treat, Raymond glanced over at Rhaegar, who was engrossed in his own apple pie. They were fraternal twins, each with their own strengths and interests. Rhaegar was more studious and equally smart, even for a child, often found with his nose buried in a book. An idea struck Raymond, and he opened his mouth again. Father, may Rhaegar come as well? He asked. If I am to be king, then I want my brother to be my future hand. A moment of stunned silence fell over the table. Rhaegar's eyes widened slightly, and even Rhaella paused, her expression showing surprise and pride. Aerys looked at his eldest son with renewed respect. That is a great idea, Raymond, Aerys said, nodding in approval. Yes, Rhaegar should attend as well. It's important for both of you to learn the ways of ruling. Rhaella smiled warmly, saying nothing but clearly pleased with Raymond's foresight and consideration. Rhaegar, however, looked somewhat betrayed. He muttered under his breath about stupid brothers and plans being ruined to read books all day. Raymond couldn't help but laugh at Rhaegar's reaction. You'll thank me one day, brother, he teased, nudging his brother playfully. Rhaegar glared, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. Fine, but you owe me, he conceded, shaking his head. I'm currently rereading Game of Thrones, and holy, I cringe every time I read Sansa's chapters. She was so frustratingly naive. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 49 comments 0 vote. Chapter 9, Growth, 265 AC. House Lefford of the Golden Tooth, another noble house located in the... Was his body still too young? Or maybe he wasn't putting much emotional control of anger and rage for it. Quote. Ah yes, a house controlling a key strategic stronghold on the border between the Westerlands and the Riverlands. But that doesn't make sense. According to Zuko's memories, firebending doesn't necessarily need rage or anger to work. He should be able to do it. So, why? Sigil of House Lefford of the Golden Tooth is a golden lion's head on a blue field. His immunity to fire was working fine. He had no problems moving the dragon eggs around fire, so why not his ability to firebend? Prince, he needed to learn to manifest actual flames to make the illusionary fire of the fire-breathing techniques show just like in the anime. Prince Raymond, Maester Corso's voice cut through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. Are you with us? Raymond blinked and straightened in his chair, feeling the eyes of both the Maester and his brother on him. Apologies, Maester Corso, he said, slightly sheepish. The Maester observed him with a keen, knowing gaze. It seems your mind is elsewhere, my prince. Would you care to share what troubles you? Raymond hesitated. He could feel Rhaegar's eyes on him, and for a moment, he was tempted to just shut up and close his mouth. But then he thought of the countless hours spent practicing and his patience running out. Fuck it, he decided to take a chance, to seek the wisdom of the Maester. He'll just go around the subject. Hopefully he'll give him some idea of what to do. Maester Corso, he began cautiously, if a person knows their worth and abilities but still struggles to achieve the expected results, what could be the reason? And how might that person overcome such a barrier? Maester Corso's expression turned thoughtful, and he stroked his beard as he considered the question. It is an interesting query, Prince Raymond. Let me tell you a story of two warriors. Raymond and Rhaegar leaned in, their attention fully captured now. There was once a knight, Maester Corso began, a man with great potential and abilities. He was destined for greatness, but he was paralyzed by fear, fear of expectations, fear of failure, fear of pain. This fear consumed him, and despite his talents, he could never reach his full potential. He died a gruesome death, unfulfilled and forgotten. Raymond felt a chill run down his spine as he listened. Then there was another man, a warrior, Maester Corso continued, who had no talent and had nothing to lose. He faced every challenge head-on, embracing the pain and the failures. This warrior became a legend. Rhaegar spoke up, his brows furrowed in confusion. How? Why did the warrior become a legend, but not the skilled knight? Why, you ask? Maester Corso stared at them like the answer was simple. For there is no match for a warrior who does not fear death. Maester Corso's eyes met Raymond's, and he concluded, sometimes, it is not the mastery of skills or the control over one's talents that is lacking, but the courage to face the fear that holds us back. To overcome that wall, one must confront and conquer their deepest fears. Raymond sat back, absorbing the Maester's words. He realized that maybe it wasn't just the physical practice he needed, but the mental fortitude to overcome his fears that had been ingrained in him since his previous life. His fear of fire. Okay, so maybe he wasn't entirely over his fear of fire yet. So what? He didn't think it mattered all that much when he had no problems putting his hands into the fire. Nor did he think about how it would feel bending the flames to his will while using his abilities. On the contrary, he was excited to firebend. But you mean to say that his remaining small fear of fire was actually the reason why he couldn't produce fire? Are you serious? Fine, so he just needed to get over it, right? Easy. Dracarys, your grace. In an instant, dragonfire was directly unleashed at him. The flames were everything Raymond had expected and more. They were warm, almost comforting, without a hint of pain or burning. The fire engulfed him entirely, swirling around his body like a living, breathing entity. Raymond struggled to open his eyes against the brightness of the flames, instinctively trying to move his body to shake off the lingering fear that clung to him. He could smell his clothes burning, the fabric disintegrating in the intense heat. Despite the chaos, he felt no pain, only a strange sense of familiarity. After a few seconds, the brightness became too much, and Raymond had to close his eyes. The fire began to fade, leaving him standing in the pit, buck naked and covered in soot. He felt a warm snort of air hit him, and he opened his eyes to see Noctis's head and snout flaring right in front of him. The dragon's piercing violet eyes watched him intently, as if assessing his condition. Dracarys, he commanded repeatedly. And Noctis followed his lead over and over again until Raymond he got used to the flames, until he could finally keep his eyes open and move freely without trembling. After the umpth time, Raymond couldn't help but burst out laughing. The sight he must have made, charred clothes, soot-covered skin, and a dragon's snout inches from his face, was too much to bear without humor. He reached out and patted Noctis on the snout, feeling the dragon's rough scales beneath his hand. Noctis responded with a deep, rumbling purr of satisfaction. As Raymond caressed Noctis, he took a moment to marvel at how much his dragons had grown. In just 6 years, they had become immense, their powerful forms dwarfing anything else in the dragon pit. Noctis was the size of a semi-trailer truck, at around 50 feet long, and 7,080 feet wingspan. Stormfire and Poseidon were all around the same size. Their canines have grown sharper and deadly, while their spikes grow even more pronounced and larger. They were no longer unguarded or easily harmed. They were threatening as they are dangerous. They would have grown even more if they weren't confined in the dragon pit. By declaring that his dragon dreams showed him, it would easily convince his father to let them out. Esser Oswald and Dagmar approached cautiously, their eyes wide with shock and clear concern. Your Grace, are you all right? Esser Oswald asked, his voice shaky. Raymond turned to them, still smiling. I am more than all right, Esser Oswald. Never better, I am free. He looked back at his dragons, his heart swelling with pride and affection. And I owe it all to my dragons. Our prince is mad as they come, I tell you. Mad, Dagmar exclaimed, removing his cloak and putting it around Raymond's naked form. Dagmar, the knight shouted, aghast. Before Raymond had time to calm Oswald, he heard the unmistakable growls of Poseidon and Stormfire. Their massive forms moved through the dragon pit, causing caretakers and handlers to scramble out of their way in a frantic rush. Poseidon reached him first, nudging his snout against Raymond gently, his excitement high. Raymond laughed and stroked Poseidon's scales, feeling the familiar coolness beneath his fingers. Miss me? he murmured, his voice filled with affection. Stormfire was not far behind. He growled at the guards, causing them to tense up, before leaning toward Raymond, demanding attention with an almost oppressive insistence. Raymond obliged, running his hands over Stormfire's black scales, feeling the heat that radiated from the dragon's body. Dagmar, standing a few paces away, shook his head and muttered, "I'll never get used to this, or the dragons." Sir Oswald nodded in silent agreement. "Your Grace, why did you do what you did?" he asked, his voice tinged with utter confusion. Raymond continued his caresses on the dragons, his attention never wavering. "Oh, I can probably wield fire now," he replied nonchalantly, as if discussing the weather. Both guards stared at him, stunned into silence. Dagmar was the first to find his voice. "Is this about your dragon dreams?" he asked with curiosity and disbelief. Raymond smirked, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Shall I show you?" he challenged. Without waiting for a response, he stepped back and assumed a practiced kung fu stance. His movements were fluid and precise, honed through years of diligent practice. As he executed a fist firebending movement, fire exploded out of his closed fist in a brilliant blaze that lit up the dragon pit. The onlookers gasped in shock, their eyes wide with amazement as they watched the flames come out of Raymond's bare hands. Even the dragons seemed to sense the significance of the moment, their eyes gleaming with approval. Raymond held the pose for a moment longer before letting the flames die down. He looked at his sworn swords, a triumphant smile on his face. "I told you," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "I'm not just a Targaryen by blood. I'm a dragon in every sense. I'm on my month-long vacation now, so my updates are going to be even more inconsistent. And yes, my story is a bit slow-paced because I'm a sucker for details. So if you don't like it, then I suggest coming back in a year after marinating this book. Omega carrot. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 58 comments 0 vote. Chapter 10. Unwanted guests. 1. The great wooden doors of the council chamber creaked open, and King Aerys II Targaryen, resplendent in his regal attire, strode into the room, his presence commanding immediate silence. The lords and council members rose from their seats in respect, their murmurs fading into an expectant hush. King Aerys took his place at the head of the table, his expression calm and relaxed. The absence of Prince Raymond, who had often attended these meetings, was notable but not unprecedented. The young prince was frequently engaged in his studies and training. Prince Rhaegar stopped attending, or rather, wasn't required to attend ever since it was clear that his young mind couldn't comprehend what they were discussing. Studious he may be, compared to his brilliant brother, he was but a normal child in the eyes of the council lords. Until then, it was agreed that the young prince wasn't required to attend until he was older. Much older. "Let us conclude the matter of the dragon pit," King Aerys began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The rebuilding progresses well, despite the challenges." The lords nodded in agreement, expressing acknowledgement. The dragon pit had long been a symbol of Targaryen power, and its reconstruction was due to the late king, Jaehaerys, as he ordered it to be rebuilt upon the return of dragons. Now, to the matter of waste management in King's Landing, Aerys continued, a hint of distaste coloring his tone. "The stench is unbearable. It is high time we address this issue." Lord Giles Rosby, the Master of Coin, seized the opportunity to voice his concerns. "Your Grace, while the idea of a sewage system is commendable, we must consider the financial implications. The Iron Throne is already in debt to the Iron Bank. Such a project would require substantial funds, which we currently lack." The council members exchanged glances, the practicality of Rosby's argument weighing heavily on their minds. King Aerys frowned, clearly displeased by the reminder of their financial constraints. Lord Simon Staunton, the Master of Laws, leaned forward. "Your Grace, Prince Raymond's proposal for a phased approach could be the solution. We can begin with the most critical areas of the city, where the stench is the worst. By addressing these first, we can alleviate some of the immediate suffering and demonstrate the project's efficacy." Lord Rosby was somewhat mollified and not entirely convinced. "And how do you suggest we fund even this initial phase, Lord Staunton?" Staunton met Rosby's gaze with unwavering determination. "We can seek temporary loans from the wealthier noble houses, promising them favorable terms once the system proves its worth. Additionally, we can levy a small tax on certain luxury goods. The benefits of a cleaner, healthier city will far outweigh the initial costs." The lords murmured amongst themselves, the practicality and foresight of the proposal evident. King Aerys's expression scrunched into a displeased frown. "I will not beg, if that's what you're saying," he spat. "Of course not, Your Grace," Lord Rosby replied quickly. "Our Master of Law is only suggesting options," he reassured, and glanced at his fellow councillor, conveying silent communication. Lord Symond cleared his throat and spoke again. "Your Grace, we could also consider asking the Hand, Lord Tywin Lannister, for a loan. No doubt he would agree with nothing in return. Unless we address our debt issues, we won't be able to proceed with any significant projects. Lord Tywin's return is expected in a few days, and we could present our case to him then." King Aerys brightened at this proposal. "An excellent suggestion, Lord Staunton. I will speak to Tywin as soon as he arrives. His financial acumen and resources could prove invaluable." The lords nodded in agreement, the tension easing as a plan began to take shape. The subject was concluded, and the discussion moved on. Lord Carlton Chelsted, the Master of Whisperers, coughed delicately before addressing the king. "Your Grace, there is another matter that requires your attention. The unwanted visitors have returned, seeking an audience with Prince Raymond. The Red Priestess and the Maesters of the Citadel have been persistent. Every year since the prince's birth, they have sought to meet with him, but you have forbidden it each time." Aerys's expression darkened evidently. "And what of it this time, Lord Chelsted?" Chelsted continued, his voice cautious. "This time, they are more insistent. They claim they will not leave until they are granted permission to see him, or else they will find a way themselves." King Aerys's anger flared. "How dare they threaten the crown? My son is not a spectacle for them to gawk at. I will not have them meddling in our affairs." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, aware of the king's temper. Lord Chelsted bowed his head. "Your Grace, perhaps we could use their insistence to our advantage. If we grant them a controlled audience, we might be able to extract useful information or even negotiate terms that benefit the crown." King Aerys's eyes narrowed, considering the suggestion. "And risk them planting ideas in my son's head. Or worse, have them spread their nonsense around my castle." Being the voice of reason, Lord Symond spoke up. "Your Grace, we could arrange a closely monitored meeting. Allow them to see Prince Raymond under strict supervision. This way, we maintain control and can gauge their intentions. We cannot hold them off forever." The room fell silent as King Aerys pondered the proposal. His anger simmered, but the practicalities of the situation began to outweigh his immediate fury. "Very well, Lord Symond. Arrange for a meeting, but ensure it is conducted under the strictest of conditions. I want a full report on their intentions and any information they may provide." Lord Symond bowed his head in acknowledgement. "It will be done, Your Grace." With the matter settled, King Aerys shifted his focus to the final items on the agenda. "Now, let us move on to the state of the realm's defenses. Lord Stefan, what news from the Master of Ships?" Later that evening, King Aerys stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the sprawling metropolis below. He was joined by Lord Symond and Esser Oswell Went, who approached with their respectful nods. "Your Grace, I have begun preparations for the meeting with the Red Priestess and the Maesters of the Citadel," Symond reported. "It will be held in the throne room under the watchful eyes of the Kingsguard." Aerys nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Ensure that nothing is left to chance, Lord Symond. I do not trust these outsiders, and I will not have them meddling in my grounds." Symond inclined his head. "Of course, Your Grace. Every precaution will be taken." As Symond turned to leave, Aerys called out. "One more thing, Lord Symond. Make sure my son is informed of the meeting, but keep him away from the details. He is still young, and I do not wish to burden him with unnecessary worries." Symond nodded once more. "As you command, Your Grace." When the Master of Laws was gone, Aerys finally regarded his Kingsguard. "I want to know why a red comet appeared in the sky earlier this afternoon." He glanced back at Oswell. "Go see my son. I have a feeling it has something to do with him." "At once, Your Grace." The knight bowed and left. Alone, Aerys pondered and recalled what a red comet would have meant, or few of the key interpretations the Maesters have studied. For one, it could have meant a sign of the return of magic and the return of dragons. To another, it would have meant an omen of great change and upheaval. Lastly, it could also mean a sign that a great leader is about to emerge. Raymond knelt on the floor, a sense of determination mingled with frustration etched on his young childlike face. Before him lay his 2 dragon eggs, one green bronze and the other gold and cream, their surfaces smooth and lifeless. He picked up the green egg, feeling its cold, unresponsive shell against his palm. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes and focused, raising his hands in a claw gesture, and a small ball of flame appeared in his palm, bright and intense. He moved it towards the eggs, engulfing them in the fiery embrace, his hopes pinned on the magic within the flames. He channeled all his energy into the task, the flames dancing and swirling around the eggs. After a few moments, he withdrew his hands, the flames still licking the eggs. He lifted the green egg once more, feeling its cold, unchanged surface. Disappointment came, and he sighed heavily, placing the egg back down. What was he missing? He tried to remember the dreamlike state in which he had hatched the first 3 dragons, the vivid colors of the flames and the response from the eggs. Maybe he needed to approach this differently. He pondered the methods of the past Targaryen dragonlords, hatched in their cradles, hatched with fire, hatched with their blood rituals. Blood. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. Blood and fire. Fire and blood. Quickly, Raymond rose to his feet and grabbed a small knife left from his dinner plate. Returning to his position in front of the eggs, he sliced his palm, hissing slightly at the sharp pain. Blood welled up and spilled onto the eggs, darkening their surfaces with crimson streaks. Raising his bloodied hand, he ignited a flame once more, covering the eggs with his flames. Come on. He waited as the room filled with the crackling sound of burning wood and the intense heat of his flames. And Raymond's eyes widened in wonder as the eggs began to shake and crack, small fissures spreading across their surfaces. With a final, triumphant burst, the shells shattered, and 2 baby dragons emerged. Well, shit, it actually worked, ah, he chuckled disbelievingly. One hatchling was forest green, its scales shimmering like emeralds in the firelight. The other was cream-flecked with gold, its delicate wings unfurling as it took its first breaths. Raymond's heart swelled with joy and excitement as he laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. The green dragon crawled out of the fireplace with surprising agility, making its way towards Raymond's lap. He lifted the cream dragon into his arms, marveling at the warmth and life that now pulsed through its small body. Welcome to the world, little buddies, Raymond greeted, his voice filled with awe. At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder why his first 3 dragons didn't require blood to hatch like these 2. The moment was interrupted when he heard a firm knock on his door. He turned his head as his green dragon perched itself proudly on his shoulders. Cradling the cream dragon in his arms, he approached the door and opened it, revealing the faces of his sworn swords, Esser Oswald Frey and Dagmar, along with Lord Simon Staunton and Esser Oswell Went of the Kingsguard. The reactions were immediate and priceless. Gasps and curses escaped the lips of all 4 men as they stiffened and took in the sight of the baby dragons. The green dragon on Raymond's shoulder preened at the attention, letting out a tiny, but fierce roar that echoed through the corridor, its small, yet imposing wings spread wide. A deep, hearty laughter was suddenly heard as Dagmar guffawed. I knew it was only a matter of time before you did something crazy again, my prince. Esser Oswald didn't even attempt to reprimand Dagmar, the shock in his eyes betrayed his composed facade. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the dragons. Raymond, who also couldn't suppress his amusement, snickered at their reactions. Meet my new friends, he said brightly. As they tried to compose themselves, Raymond took pity on them and asked, What brings you here, Lord Simond? The Master of Laws, still somewhat dazed, coughed to clear his throat and regain his composure. Prince Raymond, we have visitors who wish to meet with you. The Red Priestess and the Maesters of the Citadel have been quite persistent in seeking an audience. The king has agreed to a closely monitored meeting, which has been arranged for the morrow. Raymond raised an eyebrow, confused. A Red Priestess and Maesters? What do they want with me? That remains to be seen, my prince, Lord Simond replied blankly. But rest assured, the meeting will be held under strict precautions. Raymond nodded. Okay, thank you for informing me, Lord Simond. The man bowed slightly. Anything for my prince. Congratulations, Prince Raymond, on your newly hatched dragons. They are truly remarkable. When did you manage to hatch them? Esser Oswell finally remarked with an expression of genuine admiration. Oh yes, a job well done indeed, my prince, Simond added, not to be outdone. You truly are special to the Targaryen lineage. Raymond's lips twitched at the clear flattery. Thank you. In fact, I hatched them just now. The two men exchanged a quick glance of surprise. Just now, Esser Oswell repeated, his voice filled with awe. Raymond nodded. Yes, with my own fire and blood. For a moment, there was silence. Simmons' polite facade cracked slightly as he processed the information. Your own fire? He questioned with disbelief. With a bright, almost mischievous smile, Raymond confirmed, yes, I can wield fire now too. Esser Oswell's eyes widened in astonishment, while Simmons' face contorted as if he was barely holding on to his sanity. I beg your pardon, Simmons asked again, his voice strained. Raymond, still smiling, raised his uninjured palm face up. A ball of fire ignited in his hand, flickering brightly and casting a warm glow in the room. The undeniable proof of his powers left both men gaping in shock. His dragons squawked as they moved their heads, watching his fire dance on top of his palms curiously. At the sides, Esser Oswald and Dagmar exchanged glances filled with indiscreet understanding and a touch of pity for the visitors. This only amused Raymond more as he kept his troll smile on. See, Raymond said with a casual tone, as if holding a ball of fire was the most natural thing in the world. Simmons' polite mask slipped even further, a look of sheer bewilderment taking over. Well, by the gods, this is truly remarkable, my prince, he stammered, desperately trying to regain back his composure. Esser Oswell, still in awe, managed to mutter, astonishing, truly astonishing. I must tell the king at once. Raymond extinguished the flame with a flick of his wrist and patted the green dragon on his shoulder. This is nothing, he said with a grin. Well, if there are no more surprises for tonight, I would like to go to bed now. The men nodded, still somewhat dazed, bid their good nights, and took their leave. As Raymond began to close his door, Esser Oswald's eyes were drawn to the bloody cut on Raymond's other palm. Your hand, my prince, he exclaimed in worry. Dagmar, quick to react, turned to a nearby wandering servant. Fetch Maester Pycelle immediately, he commanded. Raymond, realizing the commotion his injury had caused, attempted to reassure them. It's nothing, really, just a small cut I did. But his sworn swords didn't listen. Dagmar, though usually carefree, looked concerned. Prince Raymond, even a small injury can cause harm if left untreated, he said, his voice uncharacteristically stern. Oswald gently guided Raymond to sit down. Please, sit and wait for the maester. Damn, Raymond sighed. This was going to be a long night. I deserve your reviews after this long-ass chapter. NobleVillainess creators' thoughts. 106 comments 0 vote. To be continued.